Good morning and welcome to the September 2024 very mindful, very demure open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 2 items and 7 enforcement actions for your consideration. First, you will consider a second report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking to ensure that people with disabilities can fully participate in video conferencing, including by the use of telecommunication relay services, or TRS. Second, you will consider a report and order that will provide 1,300 megahertz of spectrum in the 17 gigahertz band for non-geostationary satellite orbit space stations in the fixed satellite service, while also protecting incumbent operations. The order provides a more cohesive global framework for FSS operators and maximizes the efficient use of the 17 gigahertz band spectrum. For items 3 through 9, you will consider separate enforcement actions. This is your agenda for today. Please note the items listed as second, advanced methods to target and eliminate unlawful robocalls and targeting and eliminating unlawful text messages. And third, modifying rules for FM terrestrial digital audio broadcasting systems in the September 19th, 2024 Sunshine Notice have both been deleted from today's agenda. And the third item, modifying rules for FM terrestrial digital audio broadcasting systems, has been adopted by the Commission. Today's first item is titled Improving Access to Video Conferencing and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Alejandra Rourke, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Rourke, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau presents a second report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking for your consideration on access to video conferencing by people with disabilities. In the past 4 years, video conferencing has become an essential way for people to get to work, to access health care, and to connect with family and friends. Yet the accessibility of video conferencing service has not kept pace with the surge in its use. Video conferencing poses unique challenges for participation by people with disabilities, and implementation of accessibility is highly uneven. Further, the provision of telecommunications relay services is not fully integrated with video conferencing. So if adopted, the new rules would make major steps to resolve these problems, updating the Commission's accessibility performance objectives and facilitating the integrated provision of video relay service and other relay services with video conferencing. The further notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment about whether additional IVCS specific performance objectives would be added and whether additional amendments to the TRS rules would be necessary or beneficial. I'd like to thank the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau staff for their hard work on this item, and I would also like to thank the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Office of General Counsel, the Office of the Managing Director, and the Office of Communication Business Opportunities for their contributions to this item. Joining me at the table today are Bob Aldrich, Acting CGB Deputy Chief, Josh Mendelson, Acting Chief of the Disability Rights Office, Ika Fobike, and Mike Wallace, both attorney advisors in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Disability Rights Office. And Ike and Bill will present the item.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. As you know, the past 4 years have seen an exponential increase in the use of video conferencing services. What was once a useful but peripheral technology is now a ubiquitous element of American society. However, for many people with disabilities, the rise of video conferencing services has highlighted substantial barriers to communication. Not all video conferencing services offer effective accessibility features. Often, people with disabilities join a video conference call only to discover that they lack the tools to contribute to the call in a meaningful way. If adopted, the item before you would change the IVCS landscape by increasing the range of accessibility features that must be included in video conferencing platforms, if achievable. The accessibility requirements for advanced communication services in Part 14 of the Commission's rules apply to interoperable video conferencing services, or IVCS, and to equipment and software used for IVCS. IVCS is defined as a service that provides real-time video communications, including audio, to enable users to share information of the user's choosing. The second report and order would amend these rules to establish IVCS-specific performance objectives that directly address many of the most cited accessibility deficiencies currently experienced by people with disabilities in video conferences. For example, the performance objectives would be amended to specify that IVCS platforms provide accurate, synchronous captions and enable the integration of third-party captioning and sign language interpretation services. The amended performance objectives also specify that video conferencing users be able to independently activate and adjust video conferencing features that are necessary for accessibility. This includes, but is not limited to, adjusting the display of captions by changing the size, font, color, and background, and pinning specific video windows, such as those of sign language users and interpreters, so they are always easily visible on screen, no matter who is speaking or how many other participants are on the call. The second report and order also describes ways IVCS providers can comply with the already existing performance objectives, including what kinds of accessibility tools could address the needs of blind or low vision users or those with cognitive or mobility disabilities. The further notice seeks further comment to strengthen the record on whether to adopt additional IVCS-specific performance objectives, including speech-to-text functionality, screen reader verbosity controls, audio description of visual images, and objectives focused on IVCS equipment, among other items. I'll now turn it over to Bill to discuss the integration of IVCS and telecommunications relay services.
Thank you, Ike. If adopted, the second report and order would affirm that the Interstate TRS Fund supports the provision of video relay service and other forms of TRS when integrated with a video conference without connecting via a dial-up telephone call. It would amend the TRS rules to facilitate the integrated provision of VRS in a video conference addressing validation of a conference participant as a registered video relay service user, the call record details that VRS providers must submit to support compensation requests, when compensable call time begins and ends for VRS communications assistants participating in video conferences, and the situations when the TRS Fund will support multiple communications assistants in a single video conference. Further, the second report and order would amend the VRS privacy screen rule to allow VRS users and communications assistants to turn off their videos in a multi-party video conference for longer than the current limit of 5 minutes. Amend the TRS confidentiality rule to cover the types of information presented in video conferences and adopt a prohibition on exclusivity agreements between IVCS and TRS providers. Finally, to bring the TRS rules into conformance with the definition of telecommunications relay services adopted in the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010, the second report and order would amend the rule governing non-video conference situations when the TRS Fund supports multiple communications assistants on the same call. In the TRS section of the further notice, the item would seek comment on whether additional rule changes are needed to support team interpreting for VRS communications assistants on a video conference, allow the assignment of specially trained communications assistants to video conferences, and facilitate the use of Internet Protocol captioned telephone service and other forms of TRS in video conferences. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thank you. You know, so much of our lives have shifted onto the internet, onto video conferencing services. We also have an obligation, a statutory obligation, to make sure that all of these services are accessible, and we have to be taking reasonable actions to help ensure that and promote it. Today, I think we do that very well, and so this decision definitely has my support. So thanks to the chair for bringing it forward, and thanks as well to the chair and her team for all their work they're doing in preparation for the hurricane that's sort of barreling down on Helene. A lot of people don't see it at the top level, but there's a lot of work that the chair does and her team does in preparation for this. So thanks to all of them for their work on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Would certainly echo those statements with regard to the hurricane. To the item, you know, in 2023, the Commission took a critical, if overdue, step, and that was making clear that interoperable video conferencing services, Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, et cetera, are subject to the FCC's accessibility requirements. And at the time, even, I said that IVCS had become one of the very primary ways that we communicate. And that statement, of course, still rings true today, and so I'm proud of today's item. Continues the push for Americans that need critical access to these services. We must comply with the Commission's existing accessibility performance objectives, and today we amend and strengthen those objectives following the recommendations of our Disability Advisory Committee that continues to help us see clearly and guide us on our path here. We are now going to require IVCS providers to interconnect with third-party captioning and sign language interpretation services, and we'll also require them to give users greater control over the display of captions, speakers, signers, and other accessibility features. And so this means, for example, that a deaf user would be able to pin their interpreter. Another example would be a low vision user having greater control over their screen reader functionality. And so we recognize that our work here is very good today. We should be proud, but there's more work, of course, to be done. The further notice seeks additional comments on updates. Are there more specific performance objectives needed to ensure accessibility for people with speech disabilities, people with cognitive, mobility disabilities? Are additional amendments needed to ensure the accessibility of equipment and software used to provide and access IVCS? I really look forward to the record on these issues. And finally, just a brief note, I'd be remiss if we didn't note the ubiquity of IVCS is yet another reason why it's critical to ensure that all Americans have access to high-speed broadband. In a world where parent-teacher conferences, many of us who are in that stage of life have these telehealth visits, calls to, of course, grandma and grandpa, all happen over IVCS. And so neither disability nor location nor income should stand in the way of Americans being able to use these everyday services. So thank you to the stakeholders, thank you to the DAC, thank you to the chair, and the team's hard work on this. It has my strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. No comments other than to express my appreciation for the hard work on this item.
All right, and then Commissioner Gomez, and we are celebrating 1 year of Commissioner Gomez-ness. She joined us a year ago this week, and we are so glad.
Thank you. First, I'd like to echo my colleagues' thoughts on and say that my thoughts are currently with everyone in the path of Hurricane Helene. I know the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau has been working closely with FEMA and other partners throughout the week in preparation for this potentially catastrophic storm making landfall. And I will be paying close attention to our daily analyses of the impact to communications and other developments in the coming days. So I'd also like to recognize the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, CGB, Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and our Office of Media Relations, whose efforts come into play right now, from those who deploy to our disaster zones, to our 24/7 operations center, to the staff who ensure that our government partners and the public are kept up to date on the status of communications. Our dedicated agency staff, they work behind the scenes, including nights and weekends, to help fulfill this mission whenever disaster strikes. So thank you for that. And now to the item before us. The COVID-19 pandemic reshaped our daily lives. During this difficult time when we had to stay apart from each other to protect our health and those of others, we relied on technology to work, to study, to visit doctors, and to maintain all too important connections. Interconnected video conferencing services became our saving grace, a window to family, to friends, and to colleagues, and a necessity to maintain a sense of community despite our physical distance. I remember how important it was to see my family using a video conferencing service. Sometimes they didn't know how to use the video, so you'd see their forehead, but it was still an important connection. And we also celebrated my partner's birthday on a video call with family friends right at the beginning of the pandemic. But what became an essential tool could not be used to its fullest promise by people with disabilities. For many people with disabilities, these necessary tools fall short, no longer. Today, we require interoperable video conferencing services to make accessibility a priority. And this is a big deal. When we encourage accessibility by design, we all win. I look forward to seeing collaborations between IVCS providers, TRS providers, and providers of third-party services to innovate on accessibility tools and interoperable video conferencing services, and ultimately to increase access to critical modern tools for people with disabilities. Thank you to the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau for your hard work on this pivotal item. And now I would like to offer some brief remarks in Spanish. La medida de hoy exige a los servicios de videoconferencia dar prioridad a la accesibilidad. Con esta decisión, estamos fomentando mejoras en los servicios de videoconferencia. Entre otros aspectos, dar mayor precisión y sincronía al subtitulado, permitir que los usuarios se conecten con servicios de interpretación de lenguaje de señas y ofrecer interfaces de control que les permitan ajustar la visualización del subtitulado y de la interpretación por señas, además del volumen de los parlantes. Esto es un gran logro. Al estimular la innovación en las tecnologías de accesibilidad para los servicios de videoconferencia, las personas con discapacidades tendrán acceso a recursos de comunicación más modernos. El fomento de la accesibilidad a partir de diseño nos beneficia a todos. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. So there was only one time I was in the White House with Stevie Wonder, just once. It was over a decade ago when the President signed the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act into law. The iconic and fearless musician was there to celebrate this legislation that updated the Americans with Disabilities Act for the digital age. Now, celebrations are important. We should take a moment to cheer the signing of a new civil rights law. But it is just as important that we give it meaning over time, and that is what we do here today. In this decision, we take note of changes in the way we communicate that were accelerated by the pandemic. When physical doors closed, the virtual spaces provided by conferencing platforms like Zoom, Teams, and WebEx became an essential way to connect for work, school, health, and simple contact with family and friends. And while we have moved back to in-person meetings, today is making that clear, the role video conferencing platforms play in modern life has expanded. Yet for those with disabilities, this shift has not always been easy. That's because inconsistent accessibility features on these platforms have not always made it possible to use them. This needs to change because no matter who you are, you deserve the opportunity to communicate in the digital age. Last year, we began our efforts to remedy this problem. We issued an order clarifying that under the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, interoperable video conferencing services must comply with our accessibility rules. Today, we follow up with details. We update our rules to establish specific performance objectives so that video conferencing platforms offer captioning and support third-party captioning and sign language interpretation services. We make clear that users should have the ability to adjust features so that interpreters can always be visible on screen, regardless of who is speaking and who has joined a conference. On top of that, we amend our rules so that the Telecommunications Relay Service Fund supports the integration of relay services with video conferencing platforms. Then we seek comment on ways we can adopt other performance objectives for video conferencing services in order to ensure that these platforms remain accessible over time. Our efforts are consistent with the law and aligned with the fundamental idea behind it, that when technology changes, our accessibility policies need to evolve and keep pace. In his 1976 hit, Sir Duke, Stevie Wonder sings, and you're lucky I'm not singing. Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand, with equal opportunity for all to sing, dance, and clap hands. Now, I've always loved those words, and I think they resonate with what we do here today. Foster equal opportunity to communicate in a language that we understand, making it possible for everyone to create, participate, and take a stand. Thank you to the staff responsible for today's effort, including Bob Aldrich, Michael Scott, Susie Rosen-Singleton, Will Schell, Bill Wallace, Ike Ofabeke, John Mendelson, Stephen Wang, Molly Bergdorf, Dana Warwick, and Timothy Wynn from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. That was Josh Mendelson. My eyesight, sorry about that. I also want to thank Shin Yu, Dave Konskal, Karen Schroeder, Richard Mallon, Terry Kavanaugh, Erica Olson, and Joel Rabinovitz from the Office of General Counsel. Rachel Kazan, Andrew Wise, Mark Montano, Michelle Schaefer, Emily Talaga, Patrick Brogren, and Kim Makuch from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Sumita Das and Andrew Mullis from the Office of the Managing Director, Sharon Lee from the Enforcement Bureau, and Jocelyn James from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will take a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Amendment of Parts 2 and 25 of the Commission's Rules to enable NGSO fixed satellite service operations in the 17.3 to 17.8 gigahertz band, and will be presented by the Space Bureau. Julie Carney, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Carney, when you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I am pleased to introduce a Space Bureau item that furthers the Commission's space innovation agenda and continues its efforts to promote United States leadership in space. If adopted, this report and order will provide a contiguous 1,300 megahertz of spectrum for non-geostationary satellite orbit fixed satellite service downlink operations in the 17 gigahertz band. It also would adopt technical measures to protect incumbent operations from interference in the 17 gigahertz band. Importantly, this item will promote competition and empower technologically innovative and enhanced satellite services to the benefit of American consumers, and will help connect remote, unserved, and underserved areas to high-speed broadband. Joining me at the table from the Space Bureau are Patrick Weber, Deputy Chief, Marissa Velez, Chief of the Satellite Programs and Policy Division, Carolyn Mahoney, Attorney Advisor in the Satellite Programs and Policy Division. Before I turn it over to Carolyn to present the item, I offer the Bureau's thanks to our colleagues for their assistance, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the following offices: Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, Engineering and Technology, General Counsel, and International Affairs. Carolyn will now present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Before you is a report and order that would amend the Commission's rules and adopt changes to the U.S. Table of Allocations to allow non-geostationary orbit satellite systems to operate in the 17 gigahertz band in the fixed satellite service. These rule changes are designed to promote a competitive and innovative marketplace for space services in the United States, while also aligning the domestic regulatory framework with international frequency allocations and global satellite policies to ensure a cohesive operating environment for U.S. satellite operators. The updates will provide NGSO operators with a contiguous 1,300 megahertz of spectrum, allowing for enhanced satellite services for American consumers, especially in remote, unserved, and underserved areas. The report and order would also adopt technical protections for incumbent operators in the 17 gigahertz band, including geostationary satellite orbit and terrestrial fixed service operators, to safeguard existing operations while supporting efficient use of the spectrum in this frequency band. Specifically, this report and order would modify the U.S. Table of Allocations to permit NGSO operations in the space-to-earth or downlink direction in the 17.3 to 17.8 gigahertz band. NGSO operators would be permitted to operate in the 17.3 to 17.7 gigahertz portion of the band on a co-primary basis with GSO FSS operators and other primary incumbent operators. NGSO operators would also be permitted to operate in the 17.7 to 17.8 gigahertz band on a shared basis with GSO operators and on an unprotected basis with respect to terrestrial fixed service operators. The report and order would also require that NGSO operators comply with certain power level limits that have been established and adopted by the International Telecommunication Union. NGSO operators in the 17 gigahertz band would be required to comply with the ITU's equivalent power flux density limits and power flux density limits in the entire 17.3 to 17.8 gigahertz band. The report and order would further extend the EPFD and PFD limits to both the 17.3 to 17.7 and 17.7 to 17.8 bands to mitigate potential interference from NGSO FSS systems. The report and order would permit fixed satellite service earth stations to receive emissions from NGSO systems operating in the 17 gigahertz band. This would also permit applications for individual and blanket licensed NGSO FSS earth stations, with blanket licenses in the 17.7 to 17.8 gigahertz band to operate on an unprotected basis. Lastly, the report and order would authorize Earth Stations in Motion, or ESIMs, to operate and receive fixed satellite service emissions from NGSO systems in the 17 gigahertz band on an unprotected basis. The Space Bureau recommends the adoption of this report and order and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thank you so much to the team for the presentation. I understand this is your first presentation at the table, so congratulations on that, and thanks to your really hard work on this item. Thanks to the whole team for everything that you've done on this. I think as the chair has made clear, connectivity from space is a big part of our future, whether it's to Earth stations, direct to dishes that people have, or hopefully in the near future, straight to smartphones. So I think this decision will help make sure that we have the spectrum and the resources available to continue to bring that future forward into reality. So thanks for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We are in a golden era of commercial space. New satellite broadband systems are providing more choice, better performance for many Americans, including those who live, work, and travel, of course, in some of the toughest to serve areas in the United States. In order to sustain competition and innovation in satellite broadband, we need to continue to provide the spectrum to this rapidly advancing industry that it needs to survive and thrive. Today's report and order does just that, making available a contiguous 1,300 megahertz, as we heard, set of spectrum for NGS orbit operations, and we're supporting those advances in a way that will boost connectivity and spectral efficiency. Thank you to the team for the hard work. It has my strong support.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'd also like to reiterate my thanks to the Space Bureau staff for all of their hard work on this item, as well as everyone else who worked on it. Thanks.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. To close the digital divide, we are going to need all the technological solutions, including wired networks, wireless networks, and satellite broadband. So today's action builds on the Commission's efforts to support advanced satellite services to expand connectivity. This action is crucial in helping expand high-speed broadband to American consumers, especially those that are in the hardest to reach areas of our country. Our action today is bolstered by the hard work and dedication of the FCC staff at the World Radio Conference 23. Reading this item was bittersweet for me, as it reminds me that we lost OIA's chief, Ethan Lucarelli, far too soon. He was particularly proud of Neshe Gondelsberger's, work and leadership on this item at the WRC, telling us that despite significant pressure to block us from adopting the NGSO allocation, due to Neshe's determination, the USA did not give up on this action and ultimately was able to achieve its goal by the end of the conference. This was a big win for NGSO that would not have happened without Neshe's commitment, and this is Ethan's quote. I still miss Ethan dearly, and it was just like him to highlight Neshe's good work. So I want to thank Neshe for her leadership in this issue, and I want to thank the Space Bureau for your leadership on this issue as well. And thank you to the staff of the Space Bureau, the Wireless Bureau, and the Office of International Affairs for your work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. This past weekend, I spoke at the Summit of the Future at the United Nations, and I can report back that the future looks bold. Technology is transforming our world, and the Global Digital Compact adopted at the summit is a testament to the power of this change. It is a comprehensive framework for multilateral, digital cooperation, and it is an ambitious plan. So when I took the stage, I spoke about something equally ambitious: our efforts to support the growing space economy and open opportunities for communications in our skies. Last year, with the support of my colleagues, I reorganized the Federal Communications Commission to have its first ever Space Bureau. For more than 6 decades, this agency has worked on communications and commercial satellites. But what we are seeing now is new. The frequency of launch is increasing, the number of proposed constellations is growing, and the range of communications needed for non-terrestrial systems is expanding. So we reimagine the agency to support this development and help build this future. Now, since the Space Bureau launched, we have streamlined the satellite and Earth station application process. We have updated our approach to orbital debris so that in the new space economy, we are good stewards of our skies. We have adopted a new approach to spectrum sharing among non-geostationary fixed satellite service systems that promotes efficiency, competition, and innovation. We have created a first-of-its-kind-in-the-world framework for satellite operators to partner with wireless carriers to use terrestrial spectrum to connect to smartphones and satellites when there is no signal on the ground. This supplemental coverage from space is what I spoke about at the Summit of the Future because it represents our thinking about the networks of the future, where services combine to make communications more resilient, and we can make mobile dead zones a thing of the past. On top of this, we have identified new airwaves to support the growing number of commercial space launches. That brings me to our next big step toward the future of space, and it's, of course, what we do here today. We open up 1,300 megahertz of spectrum in the 17 gigahertz band for shared use by satellite systems in geostation and non-geostationary orbits. This large, contiguous block of spectrum will support advanced services, including high-speed broadband access. And our rules will allow a range of use cases from different orbits, bolstering competition in the space economy and creating more opportunities for companies from the United States around the world. This decision would not be possible without the work of our Space Bureau and Office of International Affairs, just as Commissioner Gomez mentioned, at last year's World Radio Conference in Dubai. They fought for the allocation of this band despite enormous pressure from China, Russia, and Iran to block our plans for this spectrum. So I want to thank our truly formidable team, as well as the staff responsible for this order, including Clay DeSalle, Carlos Flores, Whitney Lohmeyer, Scott McCool, Carolyn Mahoney, Catherine Medley, Janine Poltrineri, Julia Tu, Marissa Velez, and Patrick Weber from the Space Bureau. Neshe Gundelsberger, as noted for her role in this effort, from the Office of International Affairs, Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, Brian Butler, Jamie Coleman, Ira Keltz, Nick Oros, and Juan Montenegro from the Office of Engineering and Technology, Donald Stockdale and Alex Yankovich from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Susan Aaron, Dave Konskow, Joel Rabinowitz, and Roy Sherlock from the Office of General Counsel, and Jessica Griffinius, John Schabel, Blaise Cinto, and Janet Young from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. And with that, we will have a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Chair Secretary, would you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on your agenda are enforcement actions and will be presented by the Enforcement Bureau. And Loyana Gal, Chief Enforcement Bureau, will give the introduction.
All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. Because these items are enforcement actions, we're going to switch the order up just as the Commission has done in past cases that involve similar presentations at open meetings. As with all open meeting items, the Bureau circulated these items to every commissioner at least 3 weeks ago. But there's a longstanding practice at this agency that we do not publicly disclose parties of enforcement matters unless and until the Commission decides to take action. For these types of items, this means the agency formally votes on the item, then hears a brief presentation from the Bureau before proceeding to any statements that the commissioners may have. This process ensures that these sensitive matters will not be publicly disclosed until the FCC has voted to take action, and we are going to follow that precedent here. So we will now proceed to a vote on the first enforcement action. On item 3, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. Mr. Egal, please proceed with introducing the first item.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Thank you for your consideration and your votes on this critical case. Today's item is a forfeiture order against Steve Kramer, who's responsible for directing a malicious robocall scheme that combined illegal spoofing and generative AI technology in an attempt to interfere with the New Hampshire primary election this past January. Kramer sent thousands of potential voters a deepfake message imitating President Biden and used the spoof phone number associated with a New Hampshire political operative without their knowledge or consent to do so. Kramer weaponized the U.S. communications network by using the spoofing and generative AI technologies to attempt to prevent people from voting, thereby undermining the very foundation of our democratic process. In doing so, he also compromised the privacy of the New Hampshire political operative, whose phone number he illegally appropriated and deliberately used to amplify the chaos he was hoping to sow into the primary voting process. This illegal and unacceptable behavior underscores the malicious use of a spoofed phone number to wage an illegal robocalling campaign, which in this instance used deepfake generative AI technology in an attempt to interfere with an election. Kramer has claimed he made the calls to raise awareness of the dangers of AI while espousing deceptive and self-serving rhetoric. Kramer sought to lie to New Hampshire voters about everything from whose voice was on the message to whose number was dialing them. The New Hampshire political operative and the New Hampshire primary voters were carefully and deliberately chosen targets and victims of Kramer's scheme. The action we take today comes on the heels of a comprehensive settlement we announced last month with Lingo Telecom, which transmitted the spoofed calls Kramer unleashed on the New Hampshire primary voters, and firmly communicates that anyone who perpetrates such schemes will be swiftly identified, investigated, and penalized. Presenting with me is Rakesh Patel, Deputy Bureau Chief, Daniel Stepanisic, Assistant Division Chief, and Raul Rojo, Attorney Advisor in the Telecommunications Consumer Division. Raul will now present the item.
Thank you, Leon. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. This forfeiture order imposes a penalty of $6 million against Steve Kramer for making thousands of illegal robocalls in violation of Section 227E of the Communications Act of 1934 and Section 64.1604 of the Commission's rules. Steve Kramer, a political consultant, launched his illegal campaign on January 21st, 2024, 2 days before the New Hampshire primary election. The robocalls targeted New Hampshire voters and played a pre-recorded artificial intelligence-generated voice message, what is commonly referred to as a deepfake message, imitating the voice of President Biden. The deepfake message instructed recipients to save their votes for the November presidential election. Kramer knowingly caused the calls to transmit misleading and inaccurate caller ID. He knew the caller ID he used was not associated with the call campaign. It was instead associated with a local political operative who had no awareness of Kramer's scheme. He intended to harm and defraud recipients by convincing them not to vote. He intended to do so by falsely conveying that the president was advising them not to vote and by falsely representing the calls came from the phone number of the local political operative. He intended to harm the political operative by purposefully subjecting them to a stream of unsettling and confusing callbacks from deceived call recipients. On May 24th, 2024, the Commission adopted a Notice of Apparent Liability against Steve Kramer. The NAL proposed a base forfeiture of $1,000 for each of the 3,000 calls that we verified, with an additional 100% upward adjustment for egregiousness, for a total forfeiture of $6 million. Steve Kramer did not respond to the NAL. As such, we see no reason to cancel, withdraw, or reduce the proposed penalty, and we therefore impose a $6 million forfeiture in its entirety. For these reasons, and the additional details laid out in the forfeiture order, the Enforcement Bureau appreciates the Commission's adoption of this item and the request the grant of editorial privileges for conforming edits. Thank you all.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks to the team for the work on it. That's my support.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think this is a great example of the great work that the Enforcement Bureau does. This is, despite complexity the use of deep fakes and AI here, this is a prime example of why the Enforcement Bureau continues to be the cop on the beat here. The mission, the authority that you all have here, and the execution here is something that you should all be very proud of. Any arguments that we do hear as well about questions of whether the enforcement authority of our EB to act, I think really misses the mark. Here, one need only look to the Truth and Caller ID Act of 2009. In that law in particular, Congress amended the Communications Act to give the FCC authority to impose forfeitures on anyone who knowingly causes misleading or inaccurate caller identification information to be transmitted. So keep up the good work. Congratulations to the team.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Regrettably, I have to dissent for reasons previously stated that I won't go into at length. Thank you.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. So today we hold a bad actor accountable for violating our rules and harnessing new technologies to harm consumers and threaten our democratic processes. The consequences of Mr. Kramer's actions are significant for consumers and for trust in democracy. That is why this forfeiture order is so important. In addition to enforcing our longstanding rules, we are doing what is within our power to deter scams, manipulating new technologies to prey on consumers and jeopardize our democratic processes. So thank you to the Enforcement Bureau for your work on this critical item.
Thank you, Commissioners. The future of democracy is in the hands of those who vote. But this election, something new is emerging. It is now cheap and easy to use artificial intelligence to clone voices and flood us with fake sounds and images. By unlawfully appropriating the likeness of someone we know, this technology can illegally interfere with elections. We need to call it out when we see it and use every tool at our disposal to stop this fraud. Earlier this year, thousands of people in New Hampshire received a robocall with a message from President Biden. Just days before the primary election in the state, he urged voters to sit this one out and save their vote for the general election. This was bunk. It was his voice, but not his words. This was not the first time we saw the use of this kind of technology in a campaign. Last summer, the campaign of Governor DeSantis was flagged for circulating AI-altered images of former President Trump. Also not good. But what happened in New Hampshire involved a phone call, and that means this agency has a role. We kicked into high gear at the Federal Communications Commission. We acted fast. We unanimously adopted a ruling that made clear that artificial or pre-recorded robocalls using AI voice cloning technology violate the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. We partnered in this effort with state attorneys general, including the New Hampshire Attorney General, who is one of 49 state attorneys general who have signed on to a memorandum of understanding to work with this agency on junk robocalls. Now, this ruling matters because it gives our state colleagues the right to go after bad actors behind these calls and seek damages under the law. Then we worked with carriers to trace those responsible for this calling campaign. When we found the carrier behind it, we sent a cease and desist letter and notified all other carriers to go ahead and stop carrying their traffic. Then we proposed a fine, and the carrier ultimately paid $1 million and put in place policies to stop this kind of stuff going forward. When we found the individual behind it, Steve Kramer, we proposed a $6 million fine. It is this individual and this fine that we finalize here today. Let me be very clear. If you flood our phones with this junk, we will find you and you will pay. And it is not just this agency you will need to worry about. The New Hampshire Attorney General is prosecuting Steve Kramer for voter suppression and impersonation of a candidate. And we are committed to helping our colleagues in the state every step of the way. We are also committed to making clear that whenever this technology is used, it must be disclosed. That is why we have proposed requiring callers and texters to make clear they are using AI-generated technology and to disclose the use of AI-generated voices at the start of a call. It is also why we have proposed to require local, state, and issue campaigns to disclose if they use AI technology in the advertisements they air on television and radio building on disclosure practices we have had at this agency for decades. Because as these tools become more accessible, every one of us has a right to know if they are being used. I want to close by sharing a statement from the Republican New Hampshire Attorney General, John Fornella, that shows just how this work impacts our democracy. Secure, trustworthy, and transparent elections are the cornerstone of our democratic system at both the federal and state levels. It is imperative that our elections remain free from unlawful interference. The state of New Hampshire, working closely with the FCC, as well as other federal and state partners, has demonstrated a unified commitment to protecting voters from harmful robocalls and voter suppression tactics. I firmly believe that the FCC's enforcement action today will send a strong deterrent signal to anyone who might consider interfering with elections, whether through the use of unlawful robocalls, artificial intelligence, or any other means. He goes on to say, today's actions underscore our steadfast collective resolve to safeguarding and upholding the integrity of our electoral process. In New Hampshire, we unequivocally oppose any attempts to compromise our democracy, especially through the misuse of technology, and will pursue all avenues of legal recourse against those who seek to undermine democratic values. This substantial FCC fine, paired with ongoing legal efforts, send a clear and resounding warning. Voter suppression tactics will not be tolerated. We are grateful for our collaborative partnership with the FCC in this investigation. Together, we will ensure that our elections remain fair and transparent for all citizens. That is well said. So for this action today, I want to thank the staff from the Enforcement Bureau, Wireline Competition Bureau, Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Office of General Counsel, and the Office of Economics and Analytics for their work. We will now proceed to a vote on the remaining enforcement actions. Get comfortable. We got quite a few. On item 4, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. On item 5, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. On item 6, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. On item 7, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. On item 8, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. On item 9, Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye.
Votorama.
You bet. We're getting things done. All right, the item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. If I did not say that, let me repeat it. Mr. Egal, please proceed with introducing these items.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Commissioners. Thank you again for your consideration and your votes on these 6 enforcement items. 3 forfeiture orders against Brindley Marshall, Cameron Brown, and Abidas Datis, and 3 notices of apparent liability for forfeiture, or NALs, against Massner Beauplan, Raul Alcantara, and Wilner Baptiste, all for engaging in pirate radio broadcasting in violation of Section 511 of the Communications Act. The 2020 Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement Act, or Pirate Act, requires the Commission to perform yearly pirate radio sweeps in the top 5 pirate radio markets. The 3 forfeiture orders stem from the fiscal year 2023 pirate sweep conducted in Miami, Florida, while the 3 NALs arise from the fiscal year 2024 pirate sweep conducted in the New York metropolitan area. They underscore the Commission's continuing commitment to curtailing pirate radio broadcasting. With me at the table are Jeremy Marcus, Deputy Bureau Chief, and from the Office of the Field Director, Michael Rhodes, and Reggie Bashir's Field Counsel. Reggie will now present the item.
Thank you, Loyan. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, Commissioners. Unlicensed radio stations, also known as pirate radio stations, operate illegally. They undermine the Commission's efforts to manage limited radio spectrum and interference with licensed radio stations, which can endanger the public that depend on licensed radio stations for important public safety messages, including emergency alert systems and transmissions that provide vital information regarding weather events and other dangers. Accordingly, enforcement action in this area is essential. I will present the 3 forfeiture items from Miami first, followed by the 3 NALs from New York. The first forfeiture order involves Brindley Marshall, operator of the pirate radio station Hot 97.7 FM in Miami, Florida. Agents from the Miami field office previously documented Marshall's pirate radio station operating without authorization 7 times between March 2016 and October 2019, and issued 4 notices of unlicensed operation. During the fiscal year 2023 Miami Pirate Radio Sweep, agents found the station operating again without authorization 3 times in February and March of 2023. The Commission issued a Notice of Apparent Liability, or NAL, against Marshall on January 26, 2024, proposing a $358,665 forfeiture penalty, the maximum penalty allowable under the Pirate Act, for 3 days of violations, and Marshall failed to respond to it. Given Marshall's history of pirate radio operation and his disregard for multiple warnings in an NAL, the Enforcement Bureau thanks the Commission for adopting the forfeiture order, and this forfeiture order will fully affirm the underlying NAL. The second forfeiture order involves Cameron Brown, operator of the pirate radio station The Plug in Miami, Florida. Agents from the Miami field office documented Brown's pirate radio station operating without authorization 19 times between April 2016 and July 2019, and issued Brown 3 notices of unlicensed operation. As part of the 2023 Miami Pirate Radio Sweep, agents found the station again operating without authorization 3 times in February and March of 2023. The Commission issued an NAL against Brown on January 26, 2024, proposing a $358,665 forfeiture penalty, the maximum penalty allowable under the Pirate Act for 3 days of violations, and Brown failed to respond to it. Given Brown's history of pirate radio operation and his disregard for multiple warnings and an NAL, the Enforcement Bureau thanks the Commission for adopting the forfeiture order, which fully affirms the NAL. The final forfeiture order involved Abdius Datus, operator of the pirate radio station Unique FM in Miami, Florida. Agents from the Miami field office documented Datus's pirate radio station operating without authorization 4 times between May 2018 and February 2019. Because Datus had not yet been identified as the operator at the time, the Enforcement Bureau did not issue any notices of unlicensed operation. As part of the Miami Pirate Radio Sweep, agents identified Datus as the operator and found the station broadcasting without authorization 3 times in February and March of 2023. The Commission issued an NAL against Datus on January 26, 2024, proposing a $120,000 penalty, and Datus failed to respond to it. The Enforcement Bureau thanks the Commission for adopting the forfeiture order, which fully affirms the underlying NAL. I will now turn to the NALs arising from the New York Pirate Radio Sweep. The first NAL involves Masner Beauplan, operator of the pirate radio station Radio Leve Compe in Maplewood, New Jersey. As part of the New York City Market Pirate Radio Sweep, agents located Beauplan's station operating without authorization in apparent violation of the Pirate Act on November 16, 2023, and January 8, 2024. Beauplan was identified in the audio recordings as the station's president and general manager and directly linked to the station's phone number. In addition, agents found multiple Facebook accounts for Beauplan, some of which showed an advertisement for a radio program aired Monday through Saturday, which he hosts on the station. The account also displayed a photo of Beauplan next to the advertisement. Finally, the owner of the property housing the station's transmission equipment identified Beauplan as the station's operator and produced a 2023 lease agreement signed by Beauplan as president of Radio Leve Compe, LLC. The lease expressly limited the space to office space for a radio station. Based on their measurements and a view of the station's advertising, agents identified a total of 46 apparent violations of the Act by Beauplan during the period between November 16, 2023 and January 8, 2024. The NAL proposes a penalty of $920,000 against Masner Beauplan. The second NAL involves Raul Alcantara, operator of Sabor FM, a pirate radio station in Bronx, New York. During the New York City area pirate radio sweep, agents documented the station operating in the Bronx on November 1st, 2023 and January 9, 2024. Agents identified Raul Alcantara as the director of Sabor FM using social media and news media posts, including a YouTube video showing Alcantara holding a plaque with his name, along with Sabor FM identification, frequency, website, and its Bronx, New York location. Alcantara's Facebook page contains a banner displaying Sabor FM 88.9, along with numerous videos showing Alcantara identifying Sabor FM and broadcasting from his studio with the station's banner in the background. Alcantara is also directly linked to the station's contact number, phone number listed on its website. Based on their measurements and a review of the station's advertising, agents identified a total of 2 apparent violations by Alcantara. The NAL proposes a penalty of $40,000 against Raul Alcantara. The final NAL involves Wilner Baptiste, operator of the pirate radio station M1 Radio Live in Spring Valley, New York. Agents located the station operating without authorization on February 27, 2024 and June 12, 2024. Agents found a business certificate issued to M1 Radio Live listing the illegal station's broadcast site as its primary business address. The certificate was registered to the sole proprietor, Wilner Baptiste. The phone number for M1 Radio Live listed on the certificate was also linked to Baptiste. Agents also found a website for a M1 Live Radio, identifying Baptiste as the radio host and providing his biography and a photograph. The station's website lists the same contact number found on the M1 Radio Live business certificate registered to Baptiste. Based on the measurements and a review of the station's advertising, agents identified 2 total apparent violations by Baptiste. The NAL proposes a penalty of $40,000 against Wilner Baptiste. The Enforcement Bureau appreciates the Commission's adoption of these 6 items and the grant of editorial privileges.
Thank you so much for your work. We'll now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Well, I want to echo the thanks for the Enforcement Bureau, Chief Ugal. I know my trips over the last couple months, I've taken some time to meet with the Enforcement Bureau staff, both in the New York City field office as well as the field office outside of Philadelphia. So thanks to the team for helping to arrange that and seeing firsthand the hard work that they do every single day. And I'm glad that we're seeing some of that come to fruition with this vote. So I'm happy to vote in favor of it and support their good work. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, nothing further. Thank you to the field office for the hard work that you all do that I know of and have worked alongside you all for many years. So thanks for the hard work.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. No further comments at this time.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Our nation's airwaves serve the public interest in many ways, including by keeping Americans informed during times of emergency. And the Commission has a duty to protect this important resource from the threat of interference posed by pirate radio stations. So I'm pleased that we are voting on 6 items today that aim to hold pirate radio operators accountable. So thank you to the Enforcement Bureau for your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioners. At the Federal Communications Commission, we're stewards of the public airwaves, and we take this responsibility seriously. To ensure this vital resource is broadly available and free from harmful interference, we have rules that govern its use. And for those who fail to follow the rules, there are consequences. In this series of enforcement actions, we propose fines against 3 unauthorized radio operators in New York. We also finalized penalties against 3 operators based in the Miami area. Each of these actions is taken in response to the Pirate Act, in which Congress specifically directed this agency to expand its enforcement efforts to address unauthorized radio broadcasting because it can interfere with authorized stations and emergency communications. To ensure the job gets done, Congress also provided us with a special annual appropriation to do so. And today we get that job done thanks to the field regional management and agents in our Miami and New York field offices who work tirelessly on all these investigations. They are public servants who serve on the front lines of our work to enforce the rules that govern the public airwaves. And for their security, we don't name them here today, but we thank them. And I also want to thank those in Washington who took up their work and converted it into what we have here right now. And that includes Leon Egal, Jeremy Marcus, Matthew Gibson, Ryan McDonald, Michael Rhodes, David Marks, Reggie Bashirs, Robert Keller, Robert Kincaid, Erica McMahon, Dave Dombrowski, and Derek Royce-Bickey from the Enforcement Bureau, and William Dever and Dave Konskow from the Office of General Counsel. All right, nearing the end. Would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? Commissioner Carr? Commissioner Starks?
Yes, I do. It's that time of the season, the start of the school year for certainly for our law schools. And so I'd like to please stand and be recognized for my interns this semester. First up is Alfonso Marquez. He's a 2L at George Washington University School of Law, has taken a deep interest in the pressing issue for a lot of us, that's AI. And he's also my Early Career Diversity Initiative intern. Second is Talia Sampson. Talia, there she is. A 2L at the University of the District of Columbia School of Law, and she very recently completed the FCBA's Diversity Pipeline program that so many of us support. Thank you, Talia. Next up is Andrew Ware. A 3L at George Washington University School of Law. This is his second internship here at the FCC. He previously interned with the great Office of Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. I think, did I? And last, but certainly not least, is Dennis Fogley. Who actually she gets my sticker and award for longest commute. She is at the University of American Law School of Law, lives in Baltimore, and comes in. There we go. Sound is back. And comes in a couple times a week into my office, and so she's in class this morning. And thank you.
All right, Commissioner Symington, any announcements?
None at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Gomez, any announcements?
I do have some announcements today. Thank you. First, I want to let everyone know that I have a new executive assistant, Sierra Noakes. Unfortunately, she can't be here today, so I will introduce her formally next month. Next, I would like to introduce you to my 3 fall interns. First is Carolyn Joseph. She's actually not here, so she can't stand up. But she's a 3L at Georgetown Law studying technology policy, AI, and data privacy. She graduated from Harvard with a BA in philosophy and music. Carolyn directed and performed in a jazz a cappella group on multiple national and international tours, so she's our local star. Sarah Neal is at a 2L at American University. Sarah, please stand up. She became interested in telecom while working at American Tower. My colleague would like to know that. Prior to attending law school, and spent this past summer as an intern in the Wireless Bureau's Mobility Division. She is currently training to run the Marine Corps Marathon. And finally, Francesca Burke is a 2L, there she is, at Georgetown University Law Center. She is originally from Marietta, Georgia, but has been in DC since attending Georgetown for her undergraduate degree. Francesca worked in a greenhouse during her gap year where she helped grow passion fruit and prickly pear for a fragrance company. So welcome. And finally, as the chairwoman noted, yesterday was my 1-year anniversary of my swearing in as a commissioner. This year has really flown by, and it has been all I anticipated and more. Over this past year, I've traveled the globe, from Manicota, Alaska, to Cape Town, South Africa, spoken to groups of all sizes, and met with engineers that are creating the networks and technologies of tomorrow, as well as school children who are using technology to transform their educations. The things I love about the telecommunications ecosystem are the communications ecosystem. We don't want to leave out the non-tele people. Are its outsized impact on people's lives and nonstop evolution. While those characteristics create challenges, they also keep it interesting, and there is always something new to learn. I want to thank the chairwoman, my fellow commissioners, and FCC staff for welcoming me with open arms from day one, and all your thoughtfulness, dedication, and hard work across the many issues we've tackled. I also want to thank my staff. We started out a year ago at full throttle and accomplished a lot. You always made me look good, thank you. and did it with a smile and a laugh that belied the amount of work you had to do. It is truly a joy to work with you. Thank you.
Oh, what nice words. All right, get comfortable. Because I've got an acknowledgement, a new assignment, and 4 different retirements. I want to start with the acknowledgement. We have guests here today from the FCC's Intergovernmental Advisory Committee, and this is their first time at the agency for their first in-person quarterly meeting. I am so glad that so many of them are here and decided to join us in the commission room. So on behalf of the commission, we welcome you to the FCC. Of course, as local elected leaders, you know the needs and challenges consumers are facing, and we really do thank you for your partnership and willingness to serve on the committee and represent voices from all across the country. And I know you've got work to do today, so I hope you have a productive meeting. All right, I also want to acknowledge that Jeff Tignor of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau has been named the acting director of our Office of Communications Business Opportunities. Jeff is a familiar face. He's worked at the Commission for over 2 decades. He has had experience in the Wireless Bureau, Wireline Bureau, and Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and I know he is going to be incredibly helpful and thoughtful navigating and enhancing the mission of OCBO and its work to promote competition and innovation and support something that's really important, and that's opportunities for small businesses. He's in the corner hiding out there. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate your service. Okay, on to the retirements. It is my pleasure to wish Frederick Garrow the best in his retirement. He served as the Assistant Division Chief in the Investigations and Hearings Division of the Enforcement Bureau for the last 5 years. And during his time with the Commission, Mr. Garrow managed investigations involving things like the broadcast of false EAS alerts and the broadcast of commercial announcements for consideration by non-commercial stations. Prior to joining the FCC, he actually worked in private practice for 28 years, working on issues that relate to what we do, including things involving franchise authorities and broadcast signal coverage. But before that, he also worked on natural gas wholesale rate-making issues on behalf of large oil and gas producers and at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We wish him only good things in his retirement. Our next retirement is Tom Hutton, who is retiring after 20 years of government service here at the FCC. Tom joined the Enforcement Bureau in 2004 and then moved over to the Media Bureau just 2 years later. As Deputy Chief of the Audio Division, Tom's been involved in all aspects of licensing radio stations, and he's led the Media Bureau's enforcement of our rules for radio. We are going to miss his wit, his thoughtfulness, and his deep knowledge, and we wish him well in retirement. Next up is Kathleen Campbell, who retired from the FCC at the end of August after 42 years of service. She started her career on what was then the Common Carrier Bureau, then she joined what was then the International Bureau, and she completed her journey in what is right now the Space Bureau when it was launched last year. Now, during her time here, she was widely known as the face and voice of the ICFS system, where she calmly assisted so many of us with filing applications, performing queries, and remediating issues in the system. And her dedication is pretty epic because we are releasing a new update to ICFS in the next several weeks, and she delayed her retirement twice in order to make sure that she could finish that out. So we are grateful for that tenacity and service and wish her good things in retirement. The final retirement, I see him sitting in the back of the room, is Ron Rapazzi, who is the chief of our Office of Engineering and Technology, and he is retiring this month after 32 years. He actually joined the commission back in 1992 as part of the commission's engineer training program in Norfolk, Virginia. And after completing the program, he was assigned to the satellite branch in what was then the Common Carrier Bureau, which was later reorganized into the International Bureau, and so on and so forth. But anyway, he spent more than a decade in the International Bureau securing global spectrum allocations for fixed and mobile satellite services at World Radio Communications conferences. As we know, those are some tough negotiations and they're often fraught. He helped develop service rules for satellite operations and negotiated bilateral and multilateral agreements involving fixed, mobile, and broadcasting services. Upon his move to OET in 2003, Mr. Rapazzi was primarily responsible for coordinating spectrum assignments and new allocations for non-federal operations in spectrum that's shared with federal agencies, which we all know is complex business. He then became the deputy chief of the office in 2007 And he also, in that capacity, served as our liaison to the Interdepartment Radio Advisory Committee at the Department of Commerce, better known in these halls as IRAC. And he later served as the agency's representative on the technical panel established by the Spectrum Pipeline Act of 2015. So I asked Mr. Rapazzi to serve as chief of OET, and under his leadership, he got so much done. He was instrumental in updating the decades-old memorandum of our understanding between the Commission and NTIA to strengthen our co-regulatory relationship for non-federal and federal spectrum access. Also under his leadership, new unlicensed technologies are being deployed globally in the 6 gigahertz band, ushering in advanced Wi-Fi 6 and soon-to-be Wi-Fi 7. His oversight of the equipment authorization program ensures that unsecured equipment is not imported, marketed, or sold in the United States, and we can't overstate just how important that is for national security. On top of that, his oversight of the experimental licensing program helps support the test and demonstration of all kinds of new and novel technologies. Moreover, Mr. Rapazzi played a really big role in realizing what I call the single network future, where terrestrial networks such as cellular converge with satellite networks into a unified network architecture that is more resilient and reliable than one network alone. He leaves his mark on these things, and he leaves his mark on this agency. His leadership really helped shape the wireless telecommunications landscape here, and I know we will continue to appreciate his work for decades. So thank you, Ron. All right, Madam Secretary, please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, October 17th, 2024.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All right, folks, for any outside conversations, if you take them to the foyer, we greatly appreciate it. We're going to get started with the post-open meeting press conferences. So any outside conversations, if you could just please move them to the foyer, we greatly appreciate it. For those who don't know me, my name is Paloma Perez Christie. I am the Director of Office of Media Relations. Chairwoman Rosenworcel wasn't able to host her open meeting press conference. She had a conflict. But with that, I do want to welcome my colleague, Katie Gorsak, who will be leading our bureau-level press conference. And we'll be ready for your questions. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you for attending the Bureau Press Conference, where we'll take questions only on the items on today's agenda. So we're going to start off with our accessibility item to improve video conference services. Are there any questions on this item? Okay, Monty, so if CGB team could come on up. Oh. I think it has the face on it. Yes. All right, go ahead, Monty.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there were any changes to the video conferencing item from the draft version.
Yeah, there were a few changes, and the document will be released soon, so we'll be able to see what the differences are.
You don't want to give a preview?
Most of them involve the TRS part of the item.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Okay. Thank you. It's quick. All right, next we will move on to our Space Bureau item related to unlocking spectrum to support advanced satellite services. Monty, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, again, want to know if there were any changes from the draft version to the final version and what those changes are.
Okay. We'll give it a minute here.
Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to the drafters to answer your questions, but thanks for being here.
Seems wise.
Hi, no, there were no substantive changes made, only changes made to text and footnotes for clarity.
Thank you.
Hold on one second. Kelsey, do you have a question as well? Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Yes, I wanted to see if you could give any background on the incumbents that are in the band that we'll be sharing, and any, I guess, background on the protection sort of scheme that you ended up settling on in the item.
It should all be in the order. That part of the order did not change any. The few non-substantive edits we made did not affect that analysis.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this item? No? All right, thank you so much. All right, so next we're going to move on to our varied Enforcement Bureau items. So we're going to start off with the robocall item. Are there any questions on this one? No. All right, Pirate Radio. Okay, so Loyan and team, thank you. All right, Monty, go ahead.
You got a bunch of pirates getting fined here. I was wondering if there's any indication that the U.S. attorney's offices in these areas will want to go after this money, if these fines will be paid.
So those are going to apply to the forfeiture order phases of this. Again, that's something that DOJ will have to determine. And because these are in various markets, it will be determined by the specific U.S. Attorney's Office in coordination with Maine Justice. So we hope that they will. We think it's important, but those are resource decisions they'll make.
Has any U.S. attorney since the Pirate Act committed to going after any of these funds that you guys have been, these forfeitures you've been shelling out?
I don't think there's been any public statement about a commitment to go after that, after any of these forfeiture orders. But again, we strongly support DOJ allocating resources for this important work.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on our pirate items? Okay, Chris?
Hi. Do you have a rough running year-to-date total on pirate fines? And how much total has been issued since the law was passed?
Don't have that off the top of my head. I think we can get that for you, and we can break it down from NAL to forfeiture order. We can provide that to you.
Thanks.
Sure.
And we'll make sure we get that available. Are there any other questions on these items? Okay. Well, this will conclude our Bureau Presser. I believe Commissioner Carr is here for his, and so I will leave this to him. Thank you so much.
Hey, good to see you guys. Welcome to day, if I got my math right, 1046. So happy 1046th day to all who celebrate. That is obviously the number of days that we have gone since the $42 billion Internet Infrastructure Initiative to expand access to millions of Americans has been underway. And flash forward to today, and we still have 0 houses connected, 0 businesses connected, 0 shovels worth of dirt that have turned, and nothing in the pipeline until sometime next year at the earliest. But with that update for you on the timeline and chronology, happy to take your questions. Yeah.
You've said repeatedly that the current Odyssey foreign ownership situation is unique and unprecedented in FCC history. Can you say how that is so when there's many other radio groups coming out of bankruptcy have been granted the same approval?
Yeah, this decision will be an unprecedented one for the commission. Never before has the commission voted to approve the transfer of any broadcast station license, let alone the transfer of 200 of them for stations spread across 40-plus markets without going through the process that's currently codified in federal rules. So the federal rules, 1.5000, says that two things have to happen when you have excessive foreign ownership. One, at the time that you file the application, you need to file a petition for declaratory ruling. And then two, the rules provide that the commission can't approve it until that process is complete. One thing that the applicants have said is that they've pointed to a handful of staff level decisions at the Bureau that in their view, they say is on all fours with this decision. Putting aside whether there's any factual differences between those cases or not, the Hornbook law is clear on this, that staff decisions are not precedent for the commission. So it takes us back to the first starting place again. This is a novel question for the commission. The commission has never voted to do this since we adopted these procedures without going through it. Now, I'm sympathetic to wanting to emerge out of bankruptcy quickly. And that's why, as I'll sort of put forth in my statement at the right time, that I would support a rulemaking to change the rules. So that if someone wants to emerge more quickly from bankruptcy, they can go through their way. But right now, the only rule on the book is you got to go through those two-step processes, and the commission has never voted for anything other than that.
But the Bureau has done it many times, and you never objected to that before. Why not?
This transaction is the very first time that it's been raised to my attention that the special warrant process is being used in contravention to these rules on the books. There's a petition to deny that was filed here that was raised these arguments. This is the first time that this issue has been raised to my attention. And so what the Bureau did or didn't do in the past, again, it's not precedent for the commission. I can tell you as a commissioner, for better or worse, there's a lot of things that the bureaus do that as commissioners, particularly non-chair commissioners, you're not read in on. Just look at last week. There was a bureau-level decision on the EchoStar decision that I didn't find out about till after the fact. So as a legal matter, it's very straightforward. There's never been a commission-level vote to do anything other than what our rules require. If we want to create a new process, we can do that. And now maybe, again, I don't know all the facts of those prior Bureau decisions, but maybe as an original matter, there was some special circumstances, which is what waivers are all about. But at this point in time, there's nothing that these applicants have put forward to suggest there's something unique. All they've said is we're emerging from bankruptcy, and we don't think we would have the time to go through the rules. But that argument also runs into the chronology itself, which is this was filed in March. It's now been 6 months. There's no reason to think that had they filed a petition when they submitted this, we couldn't have gone through the regular course of process. So I'm sympathetic to this. I'm open to a rulemaking, but the rules on the book are clear right now.
Is there any conflict between you, your stance here on these stations, you know, with the Soros involvement, and your past statements on congressional involvement in FCC licensing decisions in Loudoun County, asking the FCC to look at a broadcaster over their content? Do you think that what you're doing here is opposed or in conflict with that?
No, my position is straightforward in all of those cases, which is that we should apply the law on the books consistent with the First Amendment. That's the same standard that I'm applying here that I've articulated in all those cases as well.
Okay, I'll stop dominating this thing.
Hey, Commissioner. Could you please address the impact of the JARCSI decision on forfeiture orders? We have a statement from Commissioner Symington recently that would not support, he appeared to be referring to JARCSI, and that he would not be supporting any more forfeiture orders, and then we had the dissents today. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, obviously I can't speak for Commissioner Symington. He had his vote line, and I'm sure he'll have either statements or he's had past statements that articulate his position. My view on these enforcement cases is that I would support the FCC taking a look at how the Jarsky decision potentially clips the wings of our enforcement authority. In my view, it would be better to do that now and on the front end rather than potentially run into an issue down the road, because there still are bad actors that are violating our laws that I think should be held accountable. And I'll make sure that we have the strongest legal footing to do that. With respect to individual cases, I'll take a look at each case, and if I think that there's a case that shouldn't proceed in light of Jarsky, then I'll raise that point. But my approach is to look at each case and whether I think it's sort of consistent with both our authority, potentially as modified by Jarsky. Of course, I'd love to do this in a broader rulemaking. I'd support it. But that's where I come out. And the particular enforcement matters we voted on today, to me, we not only had authority, but in my reading, it wasn't clear to me that Jarsky would require a different outcome in those cases.
Yeah, you brought up the EchoStar, the wireless bureau's
tried not to,
approval
but
of the EchoStar milestone. Do you have some criticisms of that move?
You know, look, this goes back to 2019 and 2020. I'll use the word DISH because that was the word that was used then. There's been some restructuring since then. DISH negotiated a settlement with the Department of Justice. There was federal district court litigation, and there was a full commission decision that all involved putting two things in place. There was a concern at the time that by moving these spectrum assets over to DISH, there was concerns that people raised about whether they would, in fact, get built out and be put to use, particularly for rural America. That was the concern that was raised. In fact, if you look at some of the federal district court litigation in New York, some DISH officials took the stand, and this was the questioning. Is this actually going to happen, or is it not? It was sort of part of the trial. There were two protections put in place to make sure that happened. One was the actual milestone build-out obligations, which are upcoming, some of them next year. Two, importantly, was if there isn't compliance with that build-out obligation, there would be upwards of $2 billion, if I remember right, in penalties. So the question was, can we trust that they'll be built out? And the answer was yes, because of these two mechanisms, build out coupled with $2 billion to miss it. And now I find out on a Friday night, I'm sitting there on my computer, a Com Daily Blast comes across and says, both of those things are now gone. The two things, DOJ settlement, federal district court litigation, full commission decision to make sure this spectrum gets put to use for the American people, had two ways that we were going to do that. Both of them wiped away in a one-sentence entry in the ULS licensing decision. This submission came in on a Tuesday night. I didn't hear anything from anyone at DISH after the filing came in. Didn't hear anything Wednesday, didn't hear anything Thursday, didn't hear anything Friday. And they're putting a press release out saying that the FCC did this, and that's how I'm learning about it. So I do think there was a pretty significant process foul on this one. I think we should have sought public comment. I thought we should have get public input. I thought commissioners' views should have been solicited, and at a minimum, obviously, sort of a heads up before the decision was made. Not that I feel strongly about it.
That's it for me.
Yeah. Anything else, Kelsey? Did we lose you? Sorry. Good. Anything else?
Do you have an opinion on the 4.9 gigahertz proceeding at this time?
I've had thoughts on 4.9 gigahertz at different points of time. I had thoughts in 2020 when we moved forward with an approach to give the spectrum effectively to states to make decisions. I've seen the same rumors that you've seen that maybe the FCC is nearing another decision on it, but I don't have any specific information to share on that one. We've had a number of proceedings over the last couple of years on it, and I'll take a look at whatever it is that the chair puts in front of the commission whenever that happens. Anything else? One last bite at it?
I got one last bite at it. your issue with the Odyssey thing is that it was from, that it's the first time the commission has had to vote on this thing.
Yeah.
The only reason the commission is voting on it is because Senator Cruz asked them to. Do you have an issue with Senator Cruz forcing the FCC to take this to the commission level?
I have no issue with Senator Cruz. I think it's a bit apples and oranges. So look, there's a threshold question that I think Senator Cruz was pushing on, which is when you have a significant transaction like this, 200 plus radio stations, 40 plus markets, third largest network of radio stations in the country, I think what Senator Cruz was saying, that's the type of decision that the people that sit on this dais are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate to make. And I think it was a reflection of a concern that a lot of people in the Senate and other places have had about significant media decisions, Sandra General Tegna, in my view, being made at the Bureau level. And so I think there's a policy of like significant major things should be voted on by the full commission. So that's sort of issue one. And then issue two is, now that it's before the commission, what do we do? And again, the law on the books runs this particular process. But when you filed the petition, there was no guarantee that you were going to get a Bureau level decision or a commission level decision. So my advice to people when they come in on the outset is to follow the black letter law, 47 CFR 1.5000. Anything else? Peanut galleries? Everyone feel good? Still nothing from Kelsey. Okay. All right. Thanks all. Appreciate it.